Heather Anderson, Tweeddale branch organic farmer and campaigner for a better food system in Scotland. Firstly, I wanted to thank Richard Lochhead, our previous Cabinet Secretary on Food and Environment, because he did all the groundwork on this bill, and Richard understood that food was the vehicle that brought together land reform, community empowerment, health and food citizenship. So thanks, Richard. We've got to carry on the good work. So why do we need a good food bill now? Well, we live in revolutionary times 3 times over. Firstly, we're living in revolutionary times because the way that we farm is about to fundamentally change. We know that chemical farming is destroying our topsoil. 40% of the antibiotics used in Europe are used in livestock, and human resistance to antibiotics is compromising basic medical procedures. We've lost 50% of our wildlife in the last 40 years. We are told that unless we change the way we farm, there are less than 100 harvests left in England. Quite simply, we can't keep raking the joint. So the chemical revolution is failing and the smart money is on agroecology. The good news is that Scotland is very well suited to organic and agroecological farming. We can do carbon neutral beef, we could do organic whisky, we could do carbon neutral dairy. We're sorted. Secondly, we're living in revolutionary times because Brexit changes everything. The loss of cap payments immediately wipes 20% out of farming income in Scotland. 20% of the money in Scottish farming is from Europe. 75% of the net income in Scottish farming is subsidy, so leaving Europe is potentially life-threatening for farming here. This year, the subsidy payments were a few months late. In 3 years' time, they will be gone. Everything we previously believed to be true about farming in Scotland is just being tipped on the floor. In the Brexit referendum, we were assured that DEFRA would save us, but that would be a bit like believing the big numbers on the big red bus that Boris used to drive round. So anyone who believes that the Westminster Treasury will help Scottish hill farmers in the politest possible terms needs their heads looked. So Brexit changes everything. Thirdly, it's revolutionary times because Paris changes everything. The Paris Climate Change Agreement changed the future, and Scotland is now committed to world-leading targets and reducing carbon emissions by 50% by 2020. 22% of our emissions come from farming, mainly methane and nitrous oxide. So setting a nitrogen budget for Scotland can help us meet those targets, and simply farming organically reduces our emissions in farming by 23%. We can do this. So we have a perfect storm: chemical and antibiotic burnout, Brexit and climate change. But we also have an amazing opportunity to do something world-leading and radical. So in revolutionary times, it's sometimes good to remember some revolutionary thinkers. One such man was Brecon-born John Boyd Orr, a Nobel Peace Prize winner for his work on nutrition, an MP, a director of the Rowett, Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organisation. John Boyd Orr was a humanitarian, a teacher, and someone who did something radical about food in Scotland. In the 1920s, he proved the link between poverty and poor diet. John Boyd Orr completely understood that you can't bridge the attainment gap if you don't bridge the nutrition gap. He introduced school milk, and while he did that, he saved the Scottish dairy industry. In 1936, this is the book, John Boyd Orr made the case for a food plan based on nutritional need, and his thinking and writing informed rationing, and we had the best diet we've ever had during the war. He set the gold standard for nutrition, saying basically that there should be the best standard for nutrition would be that you couldn't improve your health by eating better. Fair to say that John Boyd Orr would have been raging at food banks and malnourishment in Scotland. So let's honour John Boyd Orr with this bill. This bill must be world-leading, like climate change and land reform legislation, and it must be cross-cutting. This is not just about farming. It must link climate change targets with land use. It must shape our new agricultural policy. We have to state what we, as people in Scotland, want farmers to do and what we will support them to do and pay them to do. It needs to engineer direct supply chains between farmers and ourselves to reduce food waste. It needs to seriously address how we end food poverty in Scotland. The red button is going. In conclusion, the bill must be of its time and speak to its time. It must meet our climate change targets, address the agricultural train wreck that is Brexit, hold out hope for our farmers, and we must all be involved in making sure it's the best bill it possibly could be. Please make an old revolutionary proud.
Thank you. Gail Ross, MSP, who is seconding the resolution. Gail Ross.
Thank you. Thank you. Conference, in our manifesto for the Scottish Parliament this year, we committed to bringing forward a good food bill. We want to build on the significant achievements that have been made since the first national strategy in 2008. So how do we use our land and what grows on it for the benefit of the people that live here? In Scotland, we produce some of the best food and drink in the world. We export our salmon and seafood, our whisky and beef and lamb, but in a recent survey of the adult population, not everyone knew that eggs came from chickens or that beef cattle were different from dairy cattle. We have plenty of land, sea, growers, chefs and cooks, but many people, especially in more deprived areas, lack connection to their food and where it comes from. They have drifted away from the notion that they can produce food themselves and now are overly dependent on processed convenience foods. Through the Good Food Bill, we will draw together all the aspects of the Scottish Government's work on food and drink. We will look to strengthen the link between the industry and the public sector, refresh our food and drink strategy, and look how procurement can be used to increase levels of sourcing food from Scotland and ensure that more Scottish produce is procured by local authorities and public bodies. We will look at food waste, food standards, and we will implement our Good Food Nation policy, drawing on the expertise of the Scottish Food Commission and the general public. Through the Community Empowerment Act, we will cease to increase access to land for food growing purposes as part of our strong commitment to develop allotments and community gardens. We will appoint a national chef and set up a £5 million fund to promote island and regional food and drink. Conference, it's time to talk and it's time to act. Heather captured the moment perfectly in her intro, and this is exactly what we need: ideas, input and vision. The food and drink industry employs over 350,000 people, and it's vital to the economic stability of the nation. We need to ensure growth, training opportunities, marketing strategy, and encourage greater levels of research in order for the sector to prosper. And to the many thousands of workers from the EU countries that work in Scotland's food and drink industry, the message couldn't be clearer. You are not bargaining chips. We need you. You are valued. Scotland welcomes you. Conference, child and adult obesity is rising rapidly around the world. In 2014, 31% of Scotland's children were at risk of becoming overweight and 17% were at the risk of becoming obese. It's about growing your own. It's about every school growing and eating and selling their own produce. Not every school has an allotment. And today, I call on the Scottish Government to ensure policy is available so that every new school has the land to be able to grow their own food and learn about food. Conference, we want policy.
Sorry, Gail, time's up. John Gilchrist.
Good morning, Conference. I bring you greetings from the large branch down in North Ayrshire. And I would like to support this very important resolution. It recognises that the annual cost of the NHS to the country is £13 billion a year, and it's rising. It recognises that over 60% of ill health is diet and lifestyle related. That's how important food is. We increasingly hear about all the toxic chemical residues in the food in our supermarket shelves. And the trouble is that mostly we do not know what we're eating. We do not know how many of the ingredients were genetically modified. We do not know how contaminated the soil was that it was grown in, or how often the crop was sprayed in the field, or what chemicals have been added to it during the processing and packaging. So we cannot know how healthy or unhealthy the food is, unless, whenever possible, we buy organic food, free from chemical residues. We buy local food so we know where it has come from. And whenever possible, we cook from fresh. We don't use processed food. I know that many people think that organic food is expensive, but if we eat nutritional food, we only eat half as much. We actually save money, and it's our best investment in ensuring the health of our family. But who is to blame for the cheap food that we find in the shops? The ridiculous agricultural policy from Brussels, which encourage farmers to buy ridiculously big tractors that crush the life out of the soil and inject toxic residues into the food chain? Or do we blame Westminster and Holyrood? Why have they not sorted this out? Or do we blame the supermarkets for filling their shelves with poor quality food? But they only stock what we buy. Actually, I am responsible. You are responsible. You are to blame. Every time we enter a shop, we determine by what we buy the agricultural policies of Scotland. And every time we buy local, we strengthen the Scottish economy and create jobs. As a good food nation, Scotland is well able to be self-sufficient in food. This bill will enable each one of us to step up to the mark, take responsibility for our family's health, and take responsibility for developing a vibrant and robust Scottish economy. Conference, I urge you to support the motion.
Thank you, John. Tom Gray. Tom's a farmer and a councillor.
I saw Gail be cut off there. I hope I can carry on some of the things she perhaps hoped to speak. I really don't know. Anyway, becoming a good food nation. Now, I like that. A good food nation is totally dependent on an enthusiastic population skilled in all levels of food production. Yet there's a distinct scarcity. A scarcity of people to produce food. Now, how can that be? We have schools and colleges at all levels offering training in food production. 85% of our land is less favoured area, most suited to livestock rearing, and we're an animal-loving nation. The sad truth is there is a distinct lack of opportunity, appropriate opportunity, lack of appropriate rural housing, and lack of available land. Time and again, I hear the call for more people to join the farming industry. The government does, the farming industry does. Yet, curiously, industry leaders persistently call for the scrapping of the Agricultural Wages Board. How many students do you suppose study agriculture with an ambition to work for someone else? I rather think they all go into agricultural college, learn about food production because they wish to produce food for themselves, for their communities. It's clear to me they invariably aspire to farm on their own account. But what chance? Available farms and their subsidies are gobbled up by established farmers. Steadings are converted from employment land and invariably developed into suburbia-like hamlets for semi-retirees. Farm cottages become holiday homes. Rural workers, where do you suppose they go? Affordable homes in the nearest village. In effect, that's yet more subsidy to landowners. Or an encampment of mobile homes alongside acres of polytunnels. Is it any wonder our own fit and able turn their back on the farming industry? Is it any wonder our intensive fruit and vegetable growers are dependent on migrant workers? Is it any wonder tractor drivers are thinning the ground and shepherds are like hen's teeth? All my life, I've witnessed the needless loss of enterprise as generations have been denied opportunity to produce and develop food products from their beloved countryside. Considering the vast sums of public funds poured annually into farming industry, this is an utter disgrace. We are seeking to become a good food nation, and I believe we should and we can. We must dig deep into the real needs and desires of people who are keen to contribute and stop pandering to the greed and complacency of those already there. Give these people their own bit hill and glen and home in the countryside. Radical land reform with teeth, taxation and planning policies all have their place in creating opportunities for enterprise to maximise the diversity and sustainability of a good food nation.
Okay, that's time. Perfect.
I support. Thank you.
Thank you. With no cards in against and waiving the right to sum up, can we move straight to decision? Is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is.